Thank you everyone for attending the Chorley Liaison meeting. My name is Councillor Gordon France and I'm the chair of the committee. Councillor Kim Snake on my right is the vice chair. Please note this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. When you're speaking, please speak towards the microphone and switch it on, which I didn't, so everyone can hear you. Please do not obstruct your mouth to ensure that anyone lip reading can do so. If anyone is having issues, please let Democratic Services know. Some housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm sounds, please exit the way you came in. It's for real. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. If the technology fails, I will adjourn the meeting and try and resolve the issue. Otherwise, we'll just have to have the meeting at another date. Apologies, please, Ruth.
Thanks, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Riggott, Councillor Reid, Christine Bailey, Councillor Beaver and Councillor Bradley, but some of those people may come in late because they're in another meeting. Thanks.
The minutes of the previous meeting, has everybody had the opportunity to look at them, and are there any issues? Julia, have you had an issue? No, you're right, okay. That's fine. No, I thought you had an issue, Julia. Right, moving on. We've item requested at the last meeting for United Utilities, and with Ian Pilling from United Utilities as stakeholder manager for Lancashire, Matt Wilkinson for Better River Leeds, and we also have Ron Moore, the new head of wastewater for Lancashire. So welcome to the meeting. You're going to do a presentation, I believe. Over to you then.
Brilliant, thank you. So evening everyone, welcome, and I guess the slides will pop up in a second. So my name's Rob Moore, I'm the county business leader for wastewater in Lancashire. So to give a bit of context of what that means, so over the next 5 years or so, we've got one of the biggest investments in the northwest that we're making, and we're having an internal restructure to align ourselves to 5 counties so that we're better able to deliver what we need to deliver over the next 5 years within each of the counties. So Ian and Matt are with me this evening. Ian's the area engagement lead for Lancashire, as Gordon says. Matt's the regional delivery manager for the Better Rivers programme. And what we wanted to share with you tonight is, I guess, a bit of a flavour of what we're going to be delivering within Lancashire more broadly, but then also specifically within the Chorley region around kind of better rivers and protecting the environment. So that's kind of our plan for this evening. Plenty of opportunity for lots of questions. But Ian, if I hand over to you to take us through the slides.
Thanks, Rob. Just try and work the technology. Okay, I think Rob's spelled out the agenda there, so I'll give you an overview of where we are in our business planning process with Ofwat, and then we'll hand over to Matt, who will talk you through the detail of that investment and what we're going to be doing specifically in Chorley in the coming years. So, business plan. Okay. We work on a 5-year cycle with our regulator, Ofwat. So every 5 years, we put a big plan together that takes a couple of years in its preparation, and we put that into Ofwat, and that details how we will serve the customers of the northwest of England with water and wastewater services. It also details the new investments we will make to meet the new environmental regulations and new targets that are set by a whole host of regulators who look after us as a sector. So we put that plan in several months ago in the autumn period. That plan is currently being assessed by Ofwat, and over the course of the coming months we'll get feedback from Ofwat about what they think about that plan, which bits they like, which bits they don't. There'll be some refinement, and then we'll get the final answer later in the year. So lots of the stuff we'll talk to you about tonight is a proposal, but we would hope the vast majority of it would be accepted by Ofwat and taken forward. Okay. So when we set this business plan up and put it forward, we clearly had to think about the context of United Utilities and the unique circumstances we have in the northwest of England when we're designing that plan. So we serve 7.3 million people in the northwest of England, 200,000 businesses, We're quite a hilly region, we're quite a rainy region, which impacts what we say in our plan. We've got bathing waters in our patch, so 29 bathing waters that we need to look after and contribute to making sure they're of good quality. We have more runoff in the northwest of England than the rest of the UK, 28% more than the rest of the country. And these are all factors we have to take in place when we're designing that plan. A big issue for us in the northwest of England is the population and the demographic that we serve. We are acutely aware that there are many nice parts of the northwest of England, but there are also many parts of the northwest that are extremely deprived, and we need to make sure we look after those customers as well. Okay. There are some more strategic, bigger themed challenges that we have to build into our plan when we're designing it. So, for example, the growing population. It's estimated that in the northwest alone, we'll have an additional 1 million people in the next 25 years. Clearly, our plans have to reflect that growing population and growing demand for our services. Similarly, climate change. We're all acutely aware that the climate is changing. We're seeing more and more severe rainfall events, and we need to plan accordingly on the back of that. Going back to that demographic issue, the polarisation of our customer base, those people at the lower levels of affluence in our region, there doesn't seem to be a short-term fix to that. The cost of living crisis is still around us. Many of our customers are still struggling and will continue to do so. So we need to reflect that in our plans going forward. And then there are growing expectations about how we deal with environmental requirements. And you'll have all seen the press, you'll have all seen the social media interest. It is the hot topic and we need to respond to that. Okay. So when we put the plan together, I'm just struggling with the tech here, see if we can move this on. When we put the plan together, no. Thank you. Yes, we carried out a huge customer consultation exercise when we put that plan together. We actually spoke to 95,000 customers to get their views on their priorities, on what they felt was important for us as a business to deliver for them. What were the services? What were the things they wanted us to do? And could we reflect them in the plan? We used a whole host of techniques to get those views from our customers. And you could probably summarise them into those categories there that appear on the slide when it magically comes back. They want us as a business to focus on great water quality, both now and in the future. They want us to respond to those improvements required in the natural environment, and in particular the storm overflow issue that you've probably all heard about in the press. They want us to continue to focus on reducing the amount of leakage that takes place in our network. They want us to continue to support our vulnerable customers, because we do that an awful lot already. And they're acutely aware that they pay us, and it's customer bills that fund all of this. So they want us to spend their money wisely and efficiently. So we try to reflect all of that in the plan that we put forward. Next slide, please. So as Rob said right at the start, this is the biggest plan we've ever put forward as a business to our regulator. We're putting forward a plan that's an expenditure of £13.7 billion over the next 5-year period between 25 and 30. That's a 7-fold increase on the environmental programme, and that's us listening as a business and a sector to what customers and regulators want with regard to that natural environment programme that we need to up our game on and improve. The plan will support 30,000 jobs in the northwest of England, and 7,000 or thereabouts of those jobs will be new jobs created on the back of that huge infrastructure spend that we're going to be doing, and that will clearly help the northwest economy. The plan will deliver safeguarding water supplies for 2 million of our customers. It will improve water quality for 1.4 million of our customers, and it will reduce the number of spills from storm overflows by 60% in the next 5 years. And a little bit later in the presentation, Matt will give you much more detail on that. We'll improve the water quality of about 500 kilometres of rivers in the northwest, and we'll halve the chance of having a hosepipe ban going forward with our resilience expenditure. And going back to customers who struggle to pay their bills, clearly a programme this size means that bills will have to increase as well. We have to protect those customers who struggle to pay and face affordability challenges. So we've responded to that by doubling the amount of support we offer as a company to help people pay their bills. So in that next 5-year period, there'll be £525 million available to help people with trust funds, social tariffs, restart schemes, and things like that. Okay. As Rob said before, we are aligning ourselves now into county teams. Ofwat were quite, I think I can say impressed. I think we were different to all the other companies in that we put forward a regional plan for the whole of the Northwest, but we also put forward 5 separate plans, a separate plan for each county, and we're now aligning our organisation for that plan. So if you look at Lancashire in particular, there are some headlines there, and lots of the same types of metrics I've talked about already. But in Lancashire alone, we will double the number of people we help with their bills from 55,000 to over 100,000. We'll support 66,000 customers on our priority services scheme. That means that they can access our services in a way in which they suit them. And it also means that we look after them when we have operational incidents with things like bottled water and an emergency response. The programme in Lancashire will support 860 jobs, and it will improve 35 kilometres of rivers with a spend of £870 million. Okay, we'll do some stuff on improving fish and eel migration at some of our sites in the northwest, and we'll continue to play a lead role in supporting lots of the partnership work that takes place to improve rivers, coastlines and peatland as well. The headline figure on the storm overflows just for Lancashire is, in the next 5 years, we'll spend £730 million improving the performance of 91 storm overflows in Lancashire. And I'm pleased to say lots of those are in Chorley, and Matt's going to give you the detail on that. Okay. Finally, to assist with helping the Lancashire region to be more healthy, we'll clearly continue to open up our land and make it accessible for people to enjoy it from a recreation perspective. But we'll invest in bathing water and £270 million worth of projects in bathing waters in the Lancashire patch. And then the final one, we've got a huge project coming down the line for the Haweswater Aqueduct that comes from the Lake District all the way down to Manchester and feeds about 2 million people. We'll be upgrading and doing a resilience project on the Haweswater Aqueduct. That on its own is £1 billion worth of spend. So it's a huge programme, it's a step change. We feel like we've listened to our customers, we're responding to the noise, if you like, that is out there from our regulators and in the press and in social media. We're now aligning our team to get ready to deliver this huge programme. So I'll pass you over to Matt now and he'll explain some more detail for you.
Okay, I think that's working. Well, that sounds very loud, doesn't it? Move back away a bit. That's it. Evening, everybody. Matt Wilkinson, as mentioned, Regional Delivery Manager for Lancashire. So I'm looking after the capital spend on the Better Rivers programme specifically. So this is all focused around spill reduction and improvement to water quality in the rivers. I've got some, I'll fly through these for a couple of slides. I'm sure you guys are probably well versed in what a CSO is, how they function, and why they're a problem for us to fix. But basically, you've got 3 types of sewers: foul, surface, and combined. The ones that we're struggling with are the combined sewers. A lot of these are legacy infrastructure that we built during Victorian periods, when a lot of these, the towns in the northwest sort of flew up and we put them in down combined sewers. The problem is now trying to separate that flow out. So a lot of our sewers are fine when it's dry. They've got no issues. As soon as that surface water starts coming down and starts to go overwhelmed, that's when we start getting a large number of spills. So just for clarity, that's what the sort of 3 types are. And we're looking at the combined ones. Again, not to teach you to suck eggs here or anything else, because I'm sure you're very well versed in this. But essentially, these CSOs act as like a release valve on the network to try and prevent backing up of flows into properties, onto roads, but also pushing that work down to the treatment work so we can treat it and put it out to rivers, final effluent. So there's some stats on there that I won't go through. I'm conscious of time. We've got a lot of slides to get through. I'm not proposing to go through every single individual slide. Just make sure you can read those at your leisure and ask us any questions at a later date. If you just flick on for me. One thing I say around this is traditionally how we've tried to deal with it is with what we call grey solutions. So new infrastructure, large volume tanks act as sort of a detention tank for storm flows. It catches the storm water as it comes through and release it back in, and once that rainfall is sort of diminished, we've got space in the network and we pass it back through into the treatment works. That works, but it's very expensive, it's very disruptive for a lot of customers when we do that work as well, and it's got a very high carbon count to it in terms of the amount of concrete we're pouring. So one thing I wanted to call out on the next slide really is that we are trying to do things differently by trying to deal with the surface water at the source. And one of the things I want to call out to you guys, those is sort of an influential population, is we haven't got statutory permission to do these hybrid schemes. You can click onto me one slide, sorry, on rainwater management. So this is like a different way of looking at the problem. So rather than just trying to build our way out of it, we're looking to see what we can do to try and remove that surface water out of the network in the first place. So that can be either dealing with things at the high end in the catchment, as you sort of mentioned, the side around capture. Attenuation and disconnection are probably the 2 areas that we're most focused on. So where we've got cross connections between surface water and foul sewers that we can sort of disconnect and avoid having to build large infrastructure. Where can we attenuate it? So where can we slow those flows down from getting into the network? And that's what we're sort of calling green and blue solutions. It's a big growth area for us, and it's something that we're quite excited about, but it's obviously quite complex in terms of normally on third-party land, normally there's a lot of interface with councils, local authorities, national highways. So we've got a new team together. We're basically looking to try and get those opportunities on board for us across the Better Rivers programme. I'll get into the bit you probably actually want me to talk around now, around what we're doing in Chorley. The really small text, apologies, I didn't realise it was going to be that small. The headlines really for the Chorley area, we've got £85 million of investment. It's a circa around that, as sort of Ian said there. We are waiting for the final determination back from Ofwat in terms of what our business plan looks like. But I'd be very surprised if they tell us to do less overflows. Would be my sort of steer on it. It might take some money off us, but we'll definitely be delivering on those 13 schemes. A mixture of those really. You're looking at Croston and Chorley, the 2 big focus areas. We've got one that currently serves Blackburn and Withnell Fold. You can see down the sort of middle column there around solution type, the ones that are called hybrid, where we've got a grey solution, so a grey volume that we're trying to remove out of the, or build storage volume for. We're also looking at trying to remove surface water hectarage equivalent, what we call it. So say if you're trying to take out 0.6 hectares, it's about the equivalent of a football pitch that you need to find in the network. So that can be from rooftops, downpipes, schools, car parks, anywhere where we've got sort of impermeable areas where rainfall's getting into the combined sewer. We're trying to find a way of slowing it down or taking it out altogether. So headline figures really on these, you can see the volumes down on sort of the middle column there, if you guys can see it, and if you can actually read it from that distance, whether we can get it on there for you. But there's some big volumes in there. We've got some up to 5,000 metres cubed, which is equivalent of sort of 2 Olympic swimming pools. Obviously, they come with a massive amount of civils work that are required for that and long programmes. Chorley's got its own sort of intricacies in terms of how we deliver these schemes. We've got a lot of coal mining in the area and historical coal seams that we need to consider. These schemes right now are basically in mobilisation phase. So we're going out there and we're doing a lot of hydraulic modelling, which basically looks at how the surface water interfaces with the foul sewer at the moment, and where we got sort of pinch points. Have we got a good read from our current instrumentation based on what the model volume is? And we're trying to sort of account for the climate change element. So everything that we're designing to is to be designed to 2050, design horizons, what we call it. The idea being that these things are future-proofed, and as we go through the next sort of AMP cycles, we can start looking at removing more and more surface water and giving ourselves more and more capacity to reduce those spills. So the majority of the drivers on these schemes are 10 out of the 13 sites to do with the Environment Act, which is 10 spills on average per year. Appreciate a lot of people don't want any spills, and that's sort of what we're hearing loud and clear from sort of social media and customers. What I'd say on these is when you start looking at what the size of the tank would need to be able to accommodate a zero spill solution, you're building for like the Storm Desmond. If you remember that storm back in 2016, where half of Cumbria was underwater, it's very difficult to plan for those sort of really extreme weather events. So having to look at average years, which is what I've kind of put the spill reduction numbers on the side there for 20 and 21. So some of these are big spillers, 177 spills a year. The aim is to get those down to 10 spills by 2030. So say these schemes are at varying levels of maturity in terms of where we are. Some of them we've got contractors engaged and we're already looking at what the solution might be for them. Some of them are very early stage and we haven't actually got the money released yet, but we're looking at doing the modelling so that we can feed them in and try and get the best solution for the area with minimal disruption. So if you flick through, you can see where those sort of areas are. Like I said, the focal points really for us are around Chorley and Croston. This is just an example of one of the schemes that was in Cumberland Street up in Blackburn to show you the type of work we're going to be doing. It's very disruptive. It's in people's back gardens. It's in people's highways. So what we're trying to do here is try and optimise these solutions and get the solutions as far away out of the public domain for people with the least amount of disruption as possible. That takes a bit of time, and we need to work out whether the hydraulics and the models will work. So just giving you this really, not to scare you, but to sort of show you that it's going to be, we need a really good relationship with the councils and we need a really good relationship with local customers. So this is kind of an overall view. As these schemes start to develop and we've got better information, we'll then put those sessions in with the local people that are affected by it and talk about how we can try and minimise that disruption in terms of working times, access and all those other good things that we would normally do. So it was just a bit of a flavour, and then what I've got in the back of this slide deck now is just a high-level overview of each of the sites. If you can flip forward one more for me, sorry. I've got to keep getting to tell you. So it's just basically showing you a basic layout of where these locations are, so you can sort of refer these back to the overall map at the front end, where our current outfalls are, where our likely access are going to be, and what the proposed solution is in the top left-hand corner. And say they're quite high level, but what we will be doing is coming out and work with those local communities as and when the design is developed enough to actually sort of talk about it in any sort of level of detail. So I say I wasn't proposing, I'm conscious of time. I think you gave us 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and we're over. Just flick through for me. So you guys can review these sites at your leisure in terms of what's involved in each of them. And we've tried to put on there sort of local landmarks that you'll recognise so you can sort of find out where they are. And you probably wouldn't even know these overflows are there. There's sort of just a couple of manholes on the floor. Just try and give you a bit of sort of reference point back. And then, do you want to just flip through to the final one? Sorry, apologies, this is like an absolute whistle-stop tour of 13 projects that would normally take me a day to do. It's just to give you some context around what the rest of the programme looks like. So, as I mentioned before, 91 projects, 730 million, big numbers that people are throwing around. What we're trying to do now is work out how we're actually going to deliver this. It's a 4-scale increase in what we're currently doing. So we're trying to go out there into the market, but it's already got a lot of people out there doing a lot of infrastructure projects. The model around the regional model is also to try and engage with local contractors. So part of the big sort of tender process we're going through now to get all our contractors on board for the next 10 years is to understand where are they strongest, where are the areas that they want to work, and then we can start looking at getting those guys investing in supporting apprenticeship schemes. We can start growing that population of tradies that we can then come and deliver this workforce over the next 10, 15 years. So this is AMP8, AMP9's bigger, AMP10's bigger again. So we've basically got 15 years of investment to basically start trying to address some of these overflow issues. That's all we've got on it, and apologies, I know I feel like I've rattled through those schemes and I've not really given you a lot of detail on each of the individuals, but what I'd say is it's in the pack. If you've got questions, we're happy to come back and we'll talk to you about anything in detail around those individuals, or we can pick up at local sort of parish council areas where we normally do it as projects. Okay. Sorry.
Thanks, Matt.
Put too many slides in.
Any questions if we've got time?
Have we any questions? Julia?
At Eves Green, and half of Chorley, well, more than half of Chorley don't even know what's going on, and they're quite excited when you do start talking to them about it. You know, they want to know hard facts. They're glad to see the investment, glad to see it's visible, but they want to understand it as well. So I know marketing people have been down, and there's been community meetings, and they've sent out a letter this week keeping people up to date, but they really need to explore this sort of how popular this innovative work's going to be, promote it more, and at the same time have more wins with about practical things that residents can do to play their part.
Yeah. So these
And it's
green
an
jobs-
education thing as well, you know, with this, it literally is down at the moment where you're working, it's down by a massive high school.
Yep.
Um,
We're in the same area there as well. So we've got an AMP7, so the current investment cycle scheme there to look at putting in an aesthetic screen. So it's a screen onto the CSO. We're following through with part of the AMP8 scheme at the same site, but we're coming in to try and combine those two together to try and minimise disruption. But we have got a scheme at the same location to get it down to 10 spills as well, so they'll be combined together. So Martin, as soon as, it's always a balance between coming out there and talking to people really early and giving them lots of very little information, people wanting to know more detail, and then going out too late and then people say, oh, we should come to me earlier because we could have done this. So we are trying to get out a lot earlier than we normally would do. We'd normally come out at sort of planning stage where we've done a lot of the outline designs and everything else, so we've got something tangible that you could probe us on. But on some of the schemes that have been on up in the Lake District early on in the programme on Windermere, we did go out very early to try and gauge interest, understand if there's anything that we can do there in terms of influencing opinions, councils, Lake District National Park. So we are trying to get out there a lot early, but appreciate there's a lot more to do. We need to basically beef up our teams to be able to manage that number of third-party elements as well. So like I say, it's a 4 times increase. So there's a big recruitment drive going on, and we're trying to grow to be able to cope with the amount of work we've got as well.
I think just to add to that, so kind of back to the original point around how we're now setting ourselves up. So the 5 counties model, you know, dedicated team for Lancashire. We're all part of the Lancashire team. In Ian's role as area engagement lead, we'll develop those plans almost kind of with you in terms of getting those key messages out to customers, residents, and people of interest.
Go out, let him in.
Go on, Mark. You're next.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of, I mean, within Lancashire, Chorley has had the highest growth rate in the past 30 years. Now, would you say this investment is, where you've mentioned it's going to reduce spillages and that, are you looking for the future as well of the growth rate continuing? Because that's a really big worry for residents, that you might just be doing what's needed now, but you've also got to look at the future. A lot more houses coming on board and the issues they're going to cause in certain area where you've got all these new several hundred houses, estates being built, going into some very old infrastructure. So is this all part of the plan? Thanks.
Short answer is yes. So we do that kind of on a regional level, but also kind of more locally for Chorley. So whenever we put in a 5-year investment plan, part of that plan is to look at what supply and demand do we expect within any particular area. And with that, we then build the case to basically say to Ofwat, you know, we need an investment of X million pounds. This is what we're going to do with it, and this is what it's going to address in terms of supply and demand and account for those houses and developments going in. The other thing I'd kind of add to that is we're very active in terms of developer services and working with developer teams to say, right, what can we actually do to manage that rainwater more effectively? So you quite rightly point out that we've got a kind of an ageing asset base, an ageing infrastructure in terms of those combined sewer systems where we've both got foul kind of sewage going in with rainwater as well. So if we can maximise the capacity of those existing systems by removing the rainwater from going into them in the first place, because rainwater is absolutely fine to go back to the environment if it's controlled and managed in the right way, then actually what we can do is unlock additional capacity within the existing system that then helps to reduce flooding and spills going forward as well. So I guess yes on 2 fronts. So yes, in terms of the supply and demand and how we look at that for future growth. But we're not forgetting the asset base we've got and kind of what we can do to be a bit smarter around how we use the capacity there as well. Thanks, Matt.
Graham.
Graham Ashford, councillor for Heath Jarnett Parish Council. There are a number of instances where you don't project a good image. The majority of people in Heath, Charnock, Adlington, Horwich, around there, nobody wants proposed car parking charges in Rivington. Now, there's just a few on Rivington Heritage Trust want the car parking charges to pay for the terrace gardens. Now, aside from that, those terrace gardens belong to you. And it's like me asking our next door neighbour to pay for my repairs to our house. That's your land and that should be done. Now, you had consultation survey in November, about 18 months ago. No no answers and no results from that consultation have been published. And predominantly, it was around car parking charges. Now, what's happened now is the parking on a Saturday and Sunday in such a way, it takes me 20 minutes, half an hour to the 2 mile home on a Saturday lunchtime. Nobody wants the car parking charges in Rivington. And if you do, and Lancashire County then decide to put double yellow lines to stop it, especially on Horrobin Lane, it will make a hell of a mess. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I came from a maintenance background, I can't get my head round why there's so many walls being demolished. UU walls have been demolished and nobody's doing anything about them. Now in Knowsley Lane, in January last year, they rebuilt the walls after 6 months. 2 weeks after they were built, and this is within half a mile of your old chief exec's CEO's house, so he must have known they were there. They've gone through the wall again, and 15 months later, those walls are still down. Now, we've had the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, up to try and stop these kids, these youngsters, racing cars around Rivington on their roads. I was up there this morning, and there's 2 more walls missing. But whether they're fighting for the insurance money, are saying, well, Lancashire County owns that wall, we don't own it. But after 15 months, it's giving a bad impression. The whole estate looks tattered. There's wooden fences down, there's walls down, and UU are not replacing them. Now, I remember when Liverpool Corporation Waterworks were up there, and they employed dedicated dry stone wallers. Now, there must be a market for them, because we took the Police and Crime Commissioner around last May, and we showed him 17 instances where the walls were down. It's now approaching 30. One morning, there's a car parked, well, it wasn't parked, it was abandoned in your reservoir. It had come down from the viewpoint, it had gone straight through the bottom, and it was parked there. But you are not providing a service to replace those walls.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Hear you loud and
I
clear.
think Kim just wants to add to that.
I was just going to, just quickly, I was just going to add to it. I think just on the back of Graham's comments, I think, I mean, obviously, I know Mr. Pilling's changed, we'd met the previous man in his role before, but I just think there needs to be increased transparency. A lot of people from the Rivington, I mean, I know your primary aim is, and your primary focus is water, but you are one of the biggest landowners in Chorley. And I know there have been things mooted to make money off that land through the car parking and so forth. But it is, and I know, you know, the men and women on the ground do a terrific job in doing what they can. But there does need to be an increased transparency, because it's just, I mean, when we go around and talk to people in Heath, Charnock, Rivington area, all people have is a negative view about United Utilities, and I know he's trying to change that, because I know I've met him at a couple of meetings beforehand, and he's got a mountain to climb. but and I know you've got to sort water out first, but you are one of the biggest landowners in Chorley, and round our area it's just going backwards. And I know the Rangers and stuff struggle to get anything done, don't they? Or to get the money for anything. So thank you.
Sorry, the Rangers in actual fact do a good job. But if they submit a scheme to you, or say, well, that one's repairing, and they push it up the hill to you, nothing gets done.
No, I hear you loud and clear, Graham, and appreciate the comments, and I'll be the first to sit here and say sorry that's the image that we're portraying at the minute. That's not right. That's not the image that we want to portray. That's not the image that we should portray. And I guess we, as the Lancashire team, will sit here and say, we'll do our absolute best to put these things right. Now, what I can't do is sit here and say we're going to solve absolutely all the problems, because what we've got to remember is this is customers' money that we kind of use to fix these problems. We've got to spend it wisely, as Ian said. Completely hear you in terms of the transparency, and I guess that's part of what we wanted to do today, is kind of show and tell a bit of this is what we're planning to do within the North West and within Chorley, And I guess we'd welcome any opportunity to come back and share that in a bit more detail. So I think, Ian, you're probably closer to the car parking one, so if we pick that one up first.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I mean, it's a big part of why I'm here in this new role, and Kim, Councillor Snape, met you, didn't I, at Rivington Parish Council a few months ago, where we did discuss where we got to on that car parking consultation, and I think we did accept the feedback that we'd failed in terms of that level of transparency with that process and not giving you guys the final result on that. We've started that conversation now, and you've got my commitment that we'll keep you involved in that conversation if there are any plans at all around the car parking charges. We know we need to talk to people like yourselves and engage with you and bring you along with us rather than do things to you. And that's a big part of my role and why I'm here. So you've got that commitment.
So Ian, just to be clear, so are we don't yet have a decision, is that kind of what we're saying in terms of just sort of...
We don't have, so we did do the big consultation exercise. Proposals were put in front of us that for a car parking scheme. Part of that scheme involved local residents not paying the full price of car parking and probably getting a huge discount on what that car parking would be for the full year. The decision was made internally not to proceed with that car parking proposal because it was right at the start of the cost of living crisis. Okay, bills were going up left, right and centre across all sectors, and the senior management team at UU didn't feel it was the right time to bring that scheme into play because a huge proportion of our customer base was struggling in general, so the timing wasn't right. At some point, that decision will get looked at again, and we will review where we got to on that consultation process, what was the scheme that were being proposed, and then we will start an engagement process with people like yourselves on whether or not we should bring that in again.
Okay. Thank you. Mark, I'm making this last one, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Can't resist asking this question while you're in the room. You've mentioned cost of living crisis, you've mentioned customers' money, you've mentioned having to do this work, putting the bills up. So my question is going to be around shareholder dividends, because it certainly gets mentioned. Do you believe it's fair in terms of the dividends paid out and the it's not just once a year you do pay out more? Is that fair for the customers, you'd say, of the Northwest and certainly Lancashire? And as we're here, it's Chorley. Is it fair for the customers of Chorley? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think, yeah, clearly I can't comment on a political decision from 35 years ago to, privatise the water companies. We are where we are. We come in, we work hard for United Utilities. The level of return to shareholders is about 4% a year, which is about the same you would get from putting it into, a normal savings account on any high street bank at the moment. I mean, ultimately, the investment programme we're putting forward, shareholders will put that money up front for us, and customers will pay over a 50-year period, But we need that upfront investment to deliver that huge level of programme that we've been talking about earlier on today. So unfortunately, the shareholders are here and they need a return on their investment, or else they go elsewhere. And we couldn't then do the investment programme.
Thank you. Now, if you guys want to leave after your presentation, you're welcome to.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time. As I say, welcome any opportunity if you want more detail. Right. Thank you.
The slides will be available as well, are they? Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for a comprehensive presentation. Right, moving on. with an item requested at the last meeting, the Central Lancashire Local Plan, and we have the Head of Spatial Planning, Zoe Whiteside, with us. Zoe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Head of Spatial Planning here at Chorley. I've come this evening, thank you for inviting me, just to give a quick update on the local plan. It is quite brief and it is quite high level. Hopefully it's using plain English, because I'm conscious that planning is very technical in areas, but if I do use any acronyms or any language that you don't understand, please stop me and ask a question. That's absolutely fine. And if after my presentation you have any questions or you want me to come back in a future meeting, that's absolutely fine too. So like I said, it is a quick update. Next slide, please. So what my presentation will cover, and I'll probably take about 10 minutes or so to go through the slides with you tonight. I'll provide a quick update as to why we're doing a local plan. So just a reminder as to why we're doing this, and particularly on a joint footprint. A little bit about progress so far. So, you know, what we've done in the last sort of 2 or 3 years on the local plan. I know to some it seems like it takes an absolute age to get the local plan in place. So a quicker reminder of what we've done so far. Then touching on what we're currently working on, might seem like it's a bit of a quiet spell in terms of getting information out into the public domain, but we're busy working behind the scenes, so I'll talk a little bit about that work. And then I'll cover next steps, so what you'll expect to see in the next sort of 12, 18 months around the local plan, and then any questions. Okay, next slide, please. So what is a local plan? So obviously local plans are at the heart of the planning system. They dictate, you know, in terms of the determination of planning applications, and they provide the framework by which planning applications are determined. We are required to have one. There's lots of legislation, national policy and regulations that say that we do need to have a local plan in place. But more than that, they're actually beneficial. They're a strategy for the borough, and when you combine them, they're a strategy for the northwest, and then aggregating that up to England. So in theory, they should all talk to each other. They are required to be compliant with national policy. So there's a rigorous kind of test or set of tests that is applied before a local plan can be adopted. So there's lots of hoops that we have to go through. We can't just produce a local plan and adopt it. We have to run it by the planning inspectorate, who will test it in public, and there has to be lots of evidence supporting the plan. So there has to be a very rigorous kind of exercise in terms of the evidence base, testing, consultation. And quite a lot of the steps are dictated by regulation. So we can't just do one consultation and then send the plan to the inspectorate. Regulation sets out the number of consultations that we must do and what the local plan and the evidence base must also cover. Includes local and strategic policies on a broad range of topics. So obviously we talk about housing and new housing and development, but actually it's much more than that. It's a local plan, a good local plan will cover lots of things in terms of biodiversity, hedgerows, trees, design, rurality, transport, flood risk. Some of the stuff that we've talked tonight is absolutely relevant, and I will be certainly making a mental note about making sure that, you know, we're looking at what UU are doing. UU are a statutory consultee to the local plan, and we've had a meeting just today about flood risk, which I'll come on to a little bit later. But they are key to the local plan and how it all stacks up. The local plan will set out the locations for where there are opportunities for development. So if a site becomes allocated in the local plan for any use, for employment, for housing, for parks, open spaces, whatever it may be, then that, whilst that doesn't guarantee that any application will be accepted, it sets a precedent, it sets a principle, and it provides some certainty for communities as well. So the idea of being plan-led is very much about guiding development and giving some assurance, so that once we've done the consultation, once we've gone through the process of the IP, communities know what to expect, what's coming down the line in terms of any changes to their communities and their boroughs. And the new local plan will replace the existing Chorley local plan and the Central Lancashire core strategy. So in the past, there was something called a local development framework, which was kind of a compendium of policies, and there's a number of documents. The idea of the local plan will be a single planning document. That is the aim. So lots of those other supporting SPDs will fall away, and there'll be a single planning document, hopefully very, very succinct. I'm doing that, very kind of, you know, a single document, and quite short and sweet, as it were, no waffle. A meaningful document where somebody can pick it up, even to a layperson can pick it up and can see that policy requires a developer to do X or Y in terms of any proposals for development. So that's the plan. And it's undertaken jointly between Chorley, Preston and South Ribble for a variety of reasons. The core strategy that we have now is on a central Lancashire footprint. So that precedent has already been set. We've got a proven track record of working across the three. But strategically, it makes sense. We are a single housing market area. We are a functional economic market area. And what that means is we work well. There's evidence to say that there's self-containment between Chorley, Preston and South Ribble for jobs, for housing. People move between the three for shopping habits, etc. So it's kind of a proven that we work collectively. Chorley doesn't operate in isolation. Clearly, as we know as well, there is benefits to that. There's economies of scale. So all the evidence work that we're doing costs a lot of money, and it makes sense to do it jointly, that we get better value for money. And also it enables us as well to undertake strategic policy work such as housing, to look at redistributing housing need across the three. And I'm not saying that's the pure driver that we're working with our partners for, but obviously it's one of the benefits, and it makes it easier to do that through a single local plan. And also it's consistent as well, so it means that developers, land promoters working across the three can only need to pick up one document as opposed to three different local plans which could be in conflict with each other. So it makes sense for simplicity reasons. Next slide, please. So in terms of progress so far, we undertook an issues and options consultation some years ago now, in 2019-20. The idea of that really was to just kind of set the scene, to collect information about what people thought about planning, their borough, what had gone on before, what they wanted to see, what was important to them. We started to talk about sites, but only kind of, broad brush. And then after that, we did a preferred options consultation, which was in 2022 to 23. That did have site proposals in there for housing and employment, along with some policy directions. So we were starting to see the direction of travel for policies in terms of the drafting of those and what we wanted to see the local plan deliver. We've undertaken a number of calls for sites. So this is where we invite promoters, landowners, developers to come forward with sites that are available for housing or for any other use as well, or for protection. And we've gathered all of that information in, and that has been used to inform the emerging local plan. And then evidence gathering, and I can't underestimate the amount of evidence. Any members here that sit on the local plan working group will understand the complexity and the volume of evidence that we've had to, and we're still in the process of collecting. So things like strategic flood risk assessment, housing need and demand. So there's two sets of housing evidence that we collect. There's one that's about the housing requirements, so the overall number, which I know obviously is in the focus of many people's minds in terms of number of homes that we are expected to deliver a year. But there's also something else about housing need and demand, which goes more into the specific needs of our borough, types and tenures that we need to see going forward. Looks at homelessness and all those other kind of nuances in terms of housing need. Transport, we look at transport, lots of different elements of evidence gathering, and we've done a lot already, but there's still more to go at. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we're currently working on now, site selection, so we're going through a rigorous process of working through all of the sites that are currently in the mix, as it were, for housing and employment, and that involves a very detailed, meticulous exploration of kind of those sites and what development would mean of those sites and the implications. So something called a sustainability appraisal, which looks at a whole number of factors around a site in terms of its accessibility to public transport, to shops, to employment, to schools, using mapping data. And that's undertaken by a third party, somebody called Land Use Consultants on our behalf. The SFRA, which I mentioned earlier, so this is a strategic flood risk assessment, which is being undertaken by a consultant called JBA on our behalf. We've just had the draft findings of the level 1 of that information, that evidence, and the next step really is to undertake level 2 site level flood risk work. So the level 1 is identified, it's created a new floodplain, taking account of all of the recent incidents around flood risk, plus climate change, plus surface water, which national policy now requires us to do. And we've got a new 3B floodplain, which will come into play once we adopt our local plan. And what that's done is that's been overlaid in terms of the site proposals, and it's suggested where we need to do more detailed work on some sites. And so that work will then be undertaken in the next sort of 3 months or so. So all really critical work to inform whether a site should go ahead or not into the new local plan. So it's not just a case of identifying a site, yeah, that makes sense, we'll put that one in. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of understanding what the implications of that site coming forward would look like. The viability and infrastructure work, so we have a viability consultant called Aspen Verdi who will look at typologies of sites across the 3 areas. So they won't look at every individual site, but they'll have a suite of types of sites, so a large greenfield housing site to a certain number of units, a brownfield site in the city centre of Preston. And they'll look at all these different typologies and they'll take into account market factors, land values, etc., but also then develop contributions that we're proposing. Because what we have to demonstrate to an inspector is that the plan is viable and affordable, and that our sites will come forward, and so it's deliverable. So all of that work sort of demonstrates that. And then in terms of infrastructure, we're required to have something called an IDP, or an infrastructure delivery plan. And quite rightly, we have to demonstrate to an inspector that not only are we delivering the homes and the schools, the employment, but also all of the other supporting infrastructure that's needed to support that development. So things like flood risk management schemes, transport, schools education, all of those kind of, that infrastructure, we need to demonstrate that we're delivering it, and again, how it's going to be funded, financed, etc. So it's not a case of the homes and the employment will come forward and the infrastructure is kind of lagging behind. We need to demonstrate how it will all come forward together and how it will all be phased in. And then we're undertaking some refresh of key piece of evidence. And this is partly because there's been changes in national policy. Obviously, a little bit of time has elapsed since some of those evidence pieces were undertaken, sort of 2019 to 2021. And we've also designated our plan period up to 2041, so it will start from 2023 because that's where our supply starts and some of the evidence base starts, and it will run to 2041. So because of that, we're just doing some light touch refresh on our evidence. So it says there in terms of the employment land study, the housing studies, gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment, and retail. And the retail one is an interesting one because the last 2 retail studies we did, because they were done, one in South Ribble and then Chorley and Preston's together, were in 2016-17, and clearly things have changed a lot around retail, partly because of the pandemic. Shopping behaviours have changed, as we've seen. So that retail study will look specifically around changes in town centres and in shopping, etc. And just to make sure, again, that the evidence is bang up to date and the policies that reflect that, you know, in terms of those changes. Next slide, please. So in terms of the next steps, we're currently in the process of approving something called an LDS, or a local development scheme. Essentially, it's an action plan or a programme, so it just sets out the steps for plan making. We are required to have one by national policy, and I think ours is going to council in May, here, April or May? April. So that document, I mean, it is currently available on the JAC agenda for the last meeting, but it will be going to council in April. So that's a kind of a simple guide in terms of the key steps. So I've not got a slide here, but obviously the dates are below there that I'll come on to in a second. So we'll be concluding the site assessment and selection process, and that will tie in with the housing evidence that I talked about, and then the 3 councils agreeing what the housing need figure is, both for central Lancashire, and then agreeing the distribution of that housing need, and that will then talk to the supply in terms of what those allocations look like. So that's a really critical piece of work that'll be undertaken in the next sort of 3 to 4 months. The viability assessment of those sites and policies will be concluded. So in terms of the policies, there's currently 71 policies proposed to go in the new local plan. Now that might change, give or take, but there is 71 policies. So we've developed a structure of the new local plan, the chapters, and then all of the policies. And I think we've written about 30 policies, I think, are complete. A number are still in drafts that need some tweaks. And then there's a number of policies that we can't write until some of that evidence is concluded. So we're really well on with the policy drafting, which is really, really good news, because that's kind of the bulk of the work. And once those policies are complete and we're all happy with them, they will then be subject to the viability assessment. We'll conclude the sustainability appraisal and the habitats regulation assessment, so that those will need to be applied to the policies as well as the sites. So the sustainability appraisal of the sites has been undertaken, but obviously the policies have not been subject to that assessment yet. And then we'll approve the publication version local plan by all 3 councils in January, and that's kind of a big milestone, a huge milestone really. So regulations require that we publish our local plan for consultation, and that'll be the next time that it goes out into the public domain. So I would imagine that the draft plan will start being circulated across the 3 councils in November time for discussion between key portfolio holders, etc., and senior management teams, and then obviously come to the 3 councils for final approval in January. We will then consult that new local plan February to March. It'll be a 6-week consultation. And we'll go out to all of the events like we did last time. All the wards will get a drop-in event in their wards like we did last time. And obviously people will have an opportunity to have their say on the local plan. We will be doing an online consultation like we did last time, but of course if people want to submit in writing, then there'll be an opportunity to do that. We'll then consider all of those comments. There'll be a modification list of where we want to change the local plan. And we will need to we'll need to submit those changes and the local plan to the Secretary of State by the end of June. So it's envisaged that it would come back to members either through council, I'm looking at the leader now, either through councils or through exec members in terms of signing off the final local plan and the modifications that we want to do following the consultation. And then it will be submitted to the Secretary of State in June. There'll be an examination in public. We don't currently have a date for that. That's subject to the planning inspectorate setting a date, but I would envisage it would be late. It would start late June, late 2025, early 2026. With it being a 3 council local plan, that will probably take a good couple of months. They estimate 90 days, pins. Could take more, could take less, depending on the number of objectors and representations made at that EIP. And then we'll adopt the plan by the end of December 2026. And that is a deadline that the government have set for these local plans. So if we fail to meet that deadline, then we would have to create a new local plan under what's coming as a new regime, if you like. Next slide, please. So that's my whistle-stop tour. In terms of the, here you'll see the website for the local plan. So all of that interesting evidence that I've talked about is on there. If you, by all means, go in and have a look. Any information about consultation events and things going forward will be published on there. That's our email, our inbox, Central Lancashire Local Plan. So if you've got any questions about the local plan, whilst you're more than welcome to email me directly, best to use that inbox because the team can see that there. And then also those are the dates of the JAC, the Joint Advisory Committee. So this is the committee that all 3 councils sit on. It is a public meeting and obviously we publish the papers. So if you wanted to get a quick update on the local plan going forward, then it's useful to keep an eye on those meetings and the papers that go with it. Happy to take questions.
Conscious of time, so we'll try and keep the questions short if you could, please. Ian.
You said the Central Lancs local plan has been put together by the 3 authorities because they share a common economic area. Does the plan not give any acknowledgement to developments which are occurring on boundaries with other authorities, which may affect our own areas?
It will do, yeah, and we are required to undertake something called a duty to cooperate discussion with all of our where we share a boundary with the local authorities. Excuse me, so in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll contact and then meet all of the surrounding local authorities for discussions and collect their views as to any implications or issues that they have with our local plan and our proposals. And the duty to cooperate is useful in the sense that if there are things that we want another authority to do, so for example, if we had unmet housing need across the three, and we couldn't distribute that across the three, we would then be knocking on the door of Wigan, Bolton, Wyre, whichever council it would be, to say we have unmet housing need and we formally request that you pick some of that up. Now that council could say to us, we don't want to take any of your housing need, and that would all be documented, and that evidence would be presented to the inspector. So over the last couple of years, for example, Chorley have been approached by other councils for duty to cooperate discussions, and we will meet with them and we will share our issues and concerns, and that'll be documented. But yeah, the local plan will reflect that, and it will talk about those discussions and any impacts.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the housing, revised housing study of the need and demand, all because of the time scale. We've got the Coppell neighbourhood plan. Obviously, we're working on the old one. Is it imminent or is it going to be a while?
Well, the challenge with that is, I mean, we've got a meeting with the consultants DLP actually in the next few days, but I think the challenge there will be that even though the evidence will be made available, I think by the end of April, it won't be made public, and there'll be lots of discussions to be had, because what that evidence will do is it will provide, I don't know if members can remember this last, because I'm sure we did a member learning session on it. The evidence will just provide the three councils with a range of scenarios in terms of the housing requirement, and then it's up to the three councils, and there'll be a recommendation, but the three councils will need to consider all of those scenarios based on a variety of different factors which I won't go into, but we then need to decide which housing requirement feels best for us, and then obviously look at the distribution and then consider the supply that we've got. So really all of that work will take some months to complete. I wouldn't envisage the three councils agreeing the housing requirement and the supply probably for 2 or 3 months. It probably would get into September, October time.
The other question is quite scary, really, when you talk about the duty to cooperate. You know, when you get stuff sent through about what Wigan are up to, announcements today in Manchester about a new station. I wonder what your narrative's like, really, as far as you please go away. You don't really want that to happen. It's a positive, it's a real positive for the Northwest, but it's just, you know, our challenges and our aspirations just get trashed, really. I don't know how you approach it. Just sort of looking for
I think with something like that, it's just about making our representations, isn't it? I mean, I've not looked at it in any detail, but I think, like Alistair referred to, I think whenever something like that comes up, we will make representations and ask questions about the impacts for Chorley and our borough. So there's nothing to stop us doing that. We can do that, but like you say, it is a double-edged sword. It is a challenge to try and marry it all up.
To be fair, I think with the Wigan one, we certainly reflected that we were happy for them to build houses in the north of the borough if that assisted getting a railway station at Coppell, for example, because there was not the space for them to get stations in their area. So we have those conversations, and we do have that. But what they were after more was us taking some of their housing need. Well, no, thank you, we got enough of our housing needs, so why would we? But we have had conversations with Blackburn similarly in the past, haven't we, and others around us. So you have to be honest, an honest conversation. But again, you can't just say no. You've got to have an evidence base to say no, which we were consulted on the wider Manchester plan, and we put our views into the wider Manchester plan, which has just gone through. And that, I think we got an update last couple of weeks, didn't we, about where that's got to as a final plan.
I think it's been adopted, hasn't it?
Yeah, it went through its final adoption, and we had a comment on that, which was we want them to be more contiguous with our areas in terms of mirroring it, but they didn't take a lot of notice of that. They had their own fights going on internally within Manchester.
Yes, Kim, what's the question?
I just wonder, you know, with the school place planning, I know obviously that's responsibility of the county council, but presumably you'll have forecasts that will come from all your evidence and stuff as to what the projected need will be over the planned period in Chorley. I just wondered, is there any influence that Chorley Borough could play on, as the plan is developed, on the more sort of common sense approach. So, for example, in Adlington and Anderton Ward, we have Rivington and Blackrod Secondary School, which reduced its pupil admission numbers quite significantly over the last couple of years. I went to see the head teacher and he said at the drop of a hat we would increase it. But more and more people are now going to that school. But at the same time, when you speak to Lancashire County Council, they won't, geographically they are located in Chorley Borough, but because of old administrative boundaries, they're under Bolton. But I just wonder whether or not that could be factored into because more and more people are going that way now from our area, and it won't just be sort of Adlington, Anderton, it'll sort of start to come into sort of more, probably more into town and things like that, and probably more into Eastward and things. I just wonder whether or not that could be factored into any of the planning, because there's a secondary school there. I mean, I know it's an academy, but they are willing to increase their numbers. It was because of issues about people coming from the other side of Bolton, which made it totally impractical in terms of the reason why they reduced it. But I know it's more of a county thing, but do you have any influence on trying to get more of a common sense approach to that? Or?
It's a tricky, school placement is tricky. I mean, we are working positively with the county team on school planning and on transport. With regards to schools, we are pushing for a methodology to understand how the schools planning team will translate our growth once we've got the sites and they're pretty much tested and assessed like I've talked about. We want to understand from the schools planning team how they will then use that information to talk about what that looks like for them in terms of school place planning, and then any new or additional place provision that they need, or how they're going to mitigate that, because we will need to demonstrate that to the inspector to get the plan through. And we will need something called a statement of common ground, which is kind of a very formal document that we will sign, that we will present to the inspector to demonstrate we agree. So if the county council, for example, produce a methodology and produce a programme for how schools will be, school places will be met, to how that would be mitigated, then that statement of common ground will talk about that. If there's areas of disagreement, then again that would go in the statement of common ground. So we are really trying hard to get that from the county. We're just currently in the process of trying to agree a meeting date with us. I know there's been some changes in staffing in that area of in that team, but we are just trying to get a meeting together to really sort of pin them down as to what your methodology is going to be, and then some time frames. Now, obviously, we're subject to that too, because the site work, like I said, is not complete yet. There's still a lot of work to go, but we just need to make sure that they're prepared as and when we've got the sites ready, that they will then do that work and apply a methodology that we can present to an inspector that will be transparent.
Julia, I'm going to make this.
I'm just a bit concerned about an escalation in academisation really within our borough. Obviously, we've more recently seen two of our primary schools moving towards academies without any consultation. Obviously, that has an impact on how much we can control school places, and we need to be asking some quite pertinent questions when you're meeting up with them, really, because it just came as a complete shock this last month. And really the bulk, the diocese or whatever, were a lot further ahead than these, what we perceived as county schools, and they've just come through. So it's a worrying trend.
Do you want to come in on that, Alistair?
Yeah, there is nothing we can do to stop academisation of schools. That's a national legal power, so they can academise without reference to anybody locally. And there has been a programme from some of the church schools to academise, and there is also a programme within county, wasn't there, a discussion about whether they academise some of their in clusters to get around the legislation, because academies are given benefits over county schools. So it's a farcical policy in my view, but there is nothing we can do through planning about the type of school. The only restrictions usually when land's developed, the church, if the church is selling the land or donating the land, they will put stipulations on that. That's a legal case, nothing to do with planning. Just to go back on the previous point that Kim raised, we have had numbers through previously from the county education team. Like I say, it's unhelpful, they've all been changed and swapped round and they've changed the methodology, but that has been able to be used to identify sites or areas that need primary and secondary education, hasn't it, in the borough? So we have that now. whether it's still is robust enough to get through a planning inspector is something different, and that's what we're asking for currently, as I understand it. And that's not just for Chorley, that's for Chorley, South Ribble and Preston. So across the 3 areas and within the 3 areas. So they've all got different dynamics going on.
Thank you for that, Alistair. Right, thank you, Zoe. And if you'd like to leave, you're welcome to. Number 5, questions from members of the liaison and the public. Have you got any questions? So we'll move on to item 6. Items for future meetings. A schedule setting out deadlines for items to be requested on the agenda for the Chorley liaison and dates for future meetings is enclosed. I think the dates are out there. Is it about a fortnight before the meeting? Ruth?
Yeah, I normally ask for items about a fortnight before, but I do email all the parish clerks about a month before to ask if there are any items. So, but my email address is on the bottom of the agenda, so if you ever want anything at any time, just let me know. Thanks.
Yes, Julia.
Ask, I don't know how regularly we see the police, but is it possible to please come and talk about antisocial behaviour in parishes?
You can put that on as a possible item, Julia, yeah, no problem.
Through you, Chair, there's a new inspector, there's obviously a new chief constable, there's a bit of movement around, so I think it's an opportune time to get and they've just reorganised their operating model to cover the beats. So the beats have been reorganised, and some have noticed an improvement, some have noticed no difference, but I think it's an opportune time to do that, Chair, or after the, before the next meeting, or the meeting after that.
Thank you. We'll certainly make it either July's next one, isn't it?
Yes.
Hey, we have only got a temporary neighbourhood inspector in at the moment, which we can invite him, but I'm not sure whether he'll be here for very long. But as soon as we get a permanent one, I can make sure I'll pass the information through to Ruth.
Thank you, Jennifer. Item 7. Any urgent business previously agreed with the chair? I haven't got any, so thank you very much for your attendance and safe journey home.